Yeah, but meanwhile, we still have some first-place baseball going on. Luke Jones was at Oriole Park at Camden Yards on Tuesday night for a bad news final for the Birds against the upstart Colorado Rockies, who hit the ball a little bit and at least for one night quelled the bats of the Baltimore Orioles. Rough night for Chris Tillman. Luke was on the scene down there, and, very rare to see Tillman sort of like struggle to get through third and fourth innings. I mean, this is a little bit more like the Tillman of last year, the year before, than the Tillman we've seen this year, who looks like Cy Tillman, quite frankly.
Yeah, and really, Chris Tillman had spoiled the Orioles in July. His 4 July starts had an ERA of 1.29 going into Tuesday night, and he looked fairly sharp early. Pitched a 1-2-3 first inning, and looked like, okay, well, Chris Tillman looks like he's on his way to having another good start. And really, it was that third inning where he just couldn't put anyone away with 2 strikes. I mean, this was the Chris Tillman that we saw last year that just wasn't missing as many bats, wasn't getting the strikeouts. And that's not to say that Tillman's gone nuts in that department this year, but strikeouts have been up. We've talked a lot about that slider that he's been able to use as a swing and miss pitch for the better part of this season. And he didn't have that. It wasn't that he made completely awful pitches, but he was missing just enough, getting it up just a little bit too much in the strike zone. And, he really said after the game, he gave a lot of credit to that Colorado offense. And he's a guy who's pretty stand up about how he pitches. I mean, he'll be a guy who says, I didn't command my fastball. I didn't have my secondary pitches. He'll say when he isn't very good.
Which is as opposed to somebody that gives up 5 or 6 runs and says, I pitched better than that tonight.
Yeah, but this was a case where he said, look, there were a couple pitches here and there that I didn't like, but other than that, it wasn't a night where I made horrible pitches. They just hit it, and they found some holes. There were some softly hit balls that found spots, in the defense. So, it was really a case where that third inning just really hurt him. Obviously, Carlos Gonzalez hits the ground rule double into the left field corner, opposite field, and then Trevor Story singles in 2 after that, and it's 4-0 in the third inning when it looked like he might get out of it after he got Arenado to pop out. So, a frustrating night for him, certainly. That's your starter gives up 6 runs in 5 innings. That's the big story of why you lost. But on the flip side, other than Adam Jones with the 2-run homer, not a whole lot going against Chad Bettis, who has a nice sinker-slider combination that hasn't gotten him much success this year. But Adam Jones, who was one of the few Orioles who had some success against him, said that he did a nice job keeping them off balance. And you look at the middle of the lineup, I believe it was from spots 3 through 8 in the order. I believe went a combined 1 for 23 with a walk. You have that unless those other two guys come up big or you hit a couple long balls. Probably going to be a really long night for you, and that's what it ended up being from the lineup standpoint. And Orioles see their 5-game winning streak come to an end.
Well, some nights the escape pitches don't escape, right? I mean, the pitch that got you the double play last time out, right, winds up becoming first and third all of a sudden. And I guess there's bad luck, but this Rockies team, for me, watching them play for a couple days and seeing these players, we don't see these guys play. I don't stay up late watching the Rockies ever. They're never on national TV, right? I mean, you never put Sunday Night Baseball on and see the Rockies, right? So this has been a kind of an interesting little awakening for me. Boy, if the Yankees had LeMahieu and Arenado and Gonzalez and Story and Dahl, they'd be feeling pretty good about themselves. I look at the middle of that order and I say, I know they hit better out at the rock pile. I mean, sure. I get that, and we all know about the thin air, and we all know the legend of the Larry Walkers and the Galarragas and the Tulowitzkis and all those guys. But this is a very, very formidable young group of players, and I certainly didn't see it last year when I was there on the tour as much as I'm seeing it now while they come to Baltimore for a couple of days. And you study these guys, you say, well, they got 3 or 4 of, 4 years from now, all these guys could be in the All-Star game. Maybe next year all these guys could be in the All-Star game, for crying out loud. This is a pretty decent team. If they could just get some pitching in, at least for one night on Tuesday night, they got that from one of their young starters.
Yeah, they did, and they can hit. There's no doubt about it, and you said it. I mean, everyone knows about Coors Field. Are they better at Coors Field? Yes, absolutely. That's part of the narrative for any Colorado Rockies team, whether they're good or bad. The pitching hasn't been what it needs to be by any stretch of the imagination, but this team scored over 500 runs this year. I believe the only other teams in baseball to have done that are the Red Sox, who we know have the best offense in the league in terms of runs scored by a pretty wide margin. And I want to say the other one is St. Louis, but Colorado has, they've scored 514 runs this season. That's better than the Orioles have done, and we know the Orioles overall have a really good offense. So, I think that was on display a little bit more, certainly on Tuesday night than we saw the night before. The other thing that was really impressive Tuesday night, Colorado made some great defensive plays. For as much as we kind of scoffed and mocked Nolan Arenado for making the 2 errors in 2 innings on Monday night, he made a terrific play. Mark Reynolds made a terrific play at first base, and we saw that briefly in 2012 when the Orioles shifted him there. But they made some nice defensive plays throughout the night that limited some of the very few opportunities the Orioles created for themselves. So it was a nice performance for them. Orioles, you can't win them all, and certainly, as you mentioned, with Bettis, despite the fact that he came into this one with an ERA, well over 5, he pitched well. He did a nice job, but at the same time, I can't leave the Orioles off the hook completely there. They got to swing the bats much better, and they understand that.
Luke Jones joining us here. Oriole Park alive, and the Orioles about to take off, and we're about to go out to Ravens camp. And, when I get the WNST text brought to you by Coons Florida Security Boulevard, I'm just figuring this time of year it's got to be Orioles. And when I see Ravens, I almost hold my breath a little bit. But, Ozzie is sort of working around the edges of this roster right now. And this will be a moving thing over the next couple of weeks. But there are still some guys out there, including the veteran that the Ravens signed, that are still out in the marketplace looking for a gig at this point, right?
There are, and the Ravens signed, or haven't officially signed, pending a physical, which I think is important to note with Jake Long, a former first-round pick, a 4-time Pro Bowl offensive tackle. I mean, this guy, back 2008 through 2011, looked like he was on a fast track to a Hall of Fame career. You make the Pro Bowl your first 4 seasons, that's saying something, especially how we've talked about how many offensive left tackles have come into the league and struggled initially, but he's someone who didn't. But unfortunately for him, injuries have been the big story. ACL tears to his right knee 2 years in a row in 2013 and 2014. Hasn't started a game since 2014, but it's just he hasn't been healthy. So that's why he's available at this time of the year. But 2, he told ESPN a month ago that this is the best he's felt in 5 or 6 years. Now, if that's true, then this is a very intriguing signing. And I'm still leaning way more toward talking about him being a backup and being an upgrade from James Hurst, which I think everyone saw last year. There's a need to do that. But that might be a case of a guy just trying to, who said that trying to get a job, and we'll see how this plays out. But they had an open spot on the 90-man roster. We don't have terms on this deal, but you would assume little to no guarantee, incentives perhaps. But this is a guy who a few years back was one of the better left tackles in the NFL.
Yeah, he was headed to the Hall of pretty good at one point, right? I mean, It's sort of like Baselli, right? I mean, not on Baselli. I mean, Baselli was in a different league. I mean, he was at an Ogden kind of level. But, man, once you get hurt, and I guess for Baselli it was the back. For him it's been leg injuries. He's 31 years old now. Father Time loses no battles, right?
Right. And so that's why the expectations. I mean, I saw some people here and there saying, well, maybe you can move Ronnie Stanley to left guard right now. Well, my thought is you took Ronnie Stanley 6th overall. I understand the Jonathan Ogden narrative, but part of that was the Ravens had Tony Jones at left tackle then.
I still think the worst phone call I've ever had was during that year. A guy called me up in '96. I told Eric Edholm this story, who's writing the big piece out of Yahoo this week about the '96 Ravens. Guy called up and said, "Hey, Ogden's the best left guard in football. Why don't they just leave me left guard?" I'm thinking, oh boy, that's when I realized we had a long, deep slope to get back up the hill to knowing what football's all about here. But in the case of Ogden that year, that was not in any way sort of a design or a dip your toe in the water. That was just based on their roster. I can't fathom that they would take Ronnie Stanley with the 6th pick and not start him at left tackle. I mean,
that's the thing. I mean, if you had a firmly entrenched left tackle, then fine, play him at guard for a year. If not, to me, you took him to play left tackle. And if you're not confident about him playing left tackle right now, I'd ask the question, well, why'd you take him 6th overall when you're a team that has had plenty of other needs and other impact spots that they could have used help? But I again, being realistic about this, Jake Long hasn't started a game since late October of 2014. He only appeared in 4 contests for the Falcons last year. So this guy might be done. So, but at the same time, you take a flyer on him and you see how he does. And if he ends up being an upgrade over James Hurst, beautiful. You've improved your offensive line. If he somehow has recaptured or discovered the fountain of youth, and maybe he is your best left tackle because he's playing like he did in 2010, then okay, then we can talk about potentially Ronnie Stanley playing left guard. But I think the Ravens feel pretty good about John Urschel and Ryan Jensen really battling it out there. Urschel has played well at guard when he's had opportunities in his brief career, and I thought Ryan Jensen turned some heads late last year, albeit in a situation where the Ravens were completely out of the playoff picture. So I think that position is in better shape than a lot of people want to lead on, but I think it was clear they were in the market for a reserve left tackle with some experience, someone a little more established than James Hurst and DeAndre Wesley. Alex Lewis, who they drafted out of the 4th round, is someone who played tackle in college, but based on what we saw in the spring, looked like the Ravens were trying to cross-train him a little bit more at guard. So we'll see how that plays out. I mean, what we saw in the spring, all of that you take with a grain of salt from a media standpoint. I can say that now as I go into, I believe this is training camp number 8 or 9 for me, something along those lines. So, it's we'll see how it all plays out. But Jake Long, at least someone interesting to throw into that mix with some of those other reserve tackles, and you hope he can stay healthy for his sake, for the Ravens' sake, and give them a little more of an established backup behind what will be a very talented but also a rookie left tackle.
Luke, I want to get back to baseball for 1 minute because the Blue Jays are kind of surging right now, and this is kind of a weird week for the Orioles, right? I mean, they're going to play this game against the Rockies, hopefully get it through. I mean, it's obviously great young pitching matchup. You're going to see the best the Rockies have to offer this evening as well. Then you got Minnesota, then you have to go to Toronto this weekend. Toronto is surging right now. This is, a fascinating story because they've been sort of quiet and sleepy, and I know they pulled away last year, but there's never been like a thought that they've had a hot streak this year or we're going to pull away this year. Remember a couple years ago when the Orioles won, they spent the first 2 months in first place. But here come the Blue Jays, sort of kind of like last year. Here comes the trading deadline a little bit. Sort of a dangerous weekend, I think, for the Birds going up Toronto.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think an important weekend. Toronto had a pretty darn good stretch back in June before the All-Star break. But you're right. They've been that team that you've kind of been waiting. There's been so much talk, and rightfully so, about the Orioles and Red Sox duking it out for first place because it's really been those two teams that have been in first or second place, with the Orioles primarily being ahead of the Red Sox. But Toronto has quietly been right there. It's not as though they fell 8, 9, 10 games out or anything like that, but their offense for the better part of the first 3 months underperformed a little bit. Now they had some injuries, Jose Bautista being the main one. But their starting pitching's been really, really good, and there've been some questions as far as how they're going to handle some innings for some of their young starters. But for the most part, they've pitched, and they've pitched really well. So they are a team. They won 3 straight. They had a big comeback win in extra innings against San Diego on Tuesday night to leapfrog the Red Sox for second place. And they're 2 games out going into Wednesday night's action. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this weekend plays out. The Orioles are starting Ubaldo Jimenez in Minnesota on Thursday, which I know makes everyone groan, roll their eyes.
As we predicted here, though, by the way, on Monday, right? Because they really don't have any better choice, clearly, right?
Well, the issue here, it's not so much that that there's an issue with anyone else. I think they're trying to, and Buck Showalter won't say this because he doesn't want to insult the Twins, but I think they're trying to set up their rotation and have Kevin Gausman pitch in Toronto as opposed to have him pitch Thursday in Minnesota. Ubaldo's on the roster for now. We get that. They're trying to move them. We saw that with their attempts with the Melvin Upton situation that didn't work out, and he hasn't pitched in 3 weeks. and they're going to play the Minnesota Twins, who have the worst record in the American League, and that's that's a ballpark generally catered toward pitchers. If Ubaldo Jimenez can't give them even a very mediocre outing against that team, then it's the latest time where you throw up your hands and say, how can you ever trust this guy to pitch even out of the bullpen? So this is way more about giving some of their other guys an extra day. Remember, Gausman threw a career-high pitches over the weekend, so give him an extra day, gives him a chance to pitch against a better lineup in Toronto as opposed to having him just pitch against the Twins, and you kind of set your rotation for the weekend. But it's going to be a challenge. There's no doubt. I mean, Toronto playing good baseball. Keep in mind the Orioles are playing good baseball since bouncing back from the debacle in New York, where they had a number of guys sick. So it's going to be definitely a tall order. Playing at Rogers Center can be problematic. We've seen that even in some of the Orioles' best years over the last 4 or 5 years. So we'll see how that plays out. But Toronto is the team that before the season started, I picked to win the division. I thought it'd be way more about their offense, but their pitching has been, especially their starting pitching has been really good.
The Orioles are going to see all their best guys this weekend, too. They're going to see Estrada on Friday, Happ on Saturday, and Sanchez on Sunday. All of those guys are going well right now. That's why I say this is a little bit of a danger ahead kind of weekend. And, Orioles have to strap this thing up, or they'll find the Blue Jays in first place, because the Blue Jays wake up in second place today, which is the first time in a while that we could say, well, they're now involved in this thing at a time when we're coming to see them.
Yeah, well, I think they've always been involved, and again, they haven't been like the Yankees, who have kind of been in that. The Yankees have played better of late, certainly, but the
fade
Yankees have
mode is what we've
been in that 7 to 9 game out territory for a while.
They dealt off their closer the other day. I mean, if there's no more white flag than that. I mean, who deals off their closer if they think they're in a pennant race?
Well,
right?
I mean, the funny thing is, when you still have Betances and Andrew Miller, hypothetically speaking, if they continue to win over the next week, I'm not convinced 100% that they'll still sell off their other pieces. I think they probably should, but anyway, Toronto has still been within striking distance for really all year. I don't think they've fallen more than 5 or 6 games out. Remember when the Orioles had a 4.5 game lead when they were going at their absolute best in late June. I think Toronto, they've been there. But as you said, they've kind of been lying in the weeds. The offense the first few months wasn't quite what it was a year ago, but their bats have heated up. They added Melvin Upton, who I don't think is a dramatic upgrade or a season-changing kind of acquisition, but is someone that'll help them against left-handed pitching. Another outfield bat for them. But this is a team that if they can get good bullpen work down the stretch, and that's a question mark for them. That's the area for them that you kind of ask about, in addition to just figuring out some of their innings for their starters. But overall, that's a team that very much dangerous. And I remember I was asked, I was doing an out-of-town radio hit talking about the American League East, and someone asked me, so who's it going to be, Orioles or Red Sox? And I said, look, I don't really know. I can't tell the future there. I know everyone is so gaga about the Red Sox lineup, but I said at the time, don't sleep on Toronto, because their pitching's a lot better than people thought, and they can, maybe they're not the Red Sox lineup, but they can certainly swing it. And we've seen that as they're rapidly becoming one of the top offenses in the league in terms of runs scored. They're right up there in the top 5 at this point.
Strange for the Padres to be in Toronto A, because that rarely happens. And then the Upton deal happens, and the guy walks across the stadium, puts on a different jersey, and winds up pinch hitting for the Blue Jays. And on top of that, Cashner started the game on Tuesday night as well on the trading block. He might be pitching for the Orioles there this weekend, for all we know, right? At some point, you'd like to think the Orioles are going to pull the trigger on something. He appears to be the only something that is sort of left out there. I don't think there's anything else that's been rumored that I see is even remotely realistic, right?
Yeah, it's tough. Cashner has good stuff, but he hasn't performed the last couple of years. You look at now. To his credit, he pitched pretty well against a really tough Blue Jays lineup. He had a respectable outing. So gave up a 2-run homer in against Donaldson in the first inning, I believe. But you're right. He's kind of there's been some talk about Hellickson, and but he's kind of been the guy that the Orioles appear to be linked to the most. Doesn't mean that they're the front runner for him, but you've heard the Orioles' name as far as being linked to him. Now, there are other teams that have been linked to him as well, so we'll see how it plays out.
Well, Scott Miller was on the show and reported that Angelos nixed the Upton deal, right? I mean, Angelos was involved in this week because of the money that was involved.
Right.
And, who knows where Jimenez, fit in this plan. But, the Orioles, apparently Dan had the thing to the ledge of acquiring Upton, and it just didn't happen here this week.
Yeah, and it's interesting to know how that really played out. Was this a standpoint where Dan thought he had something in play? But as you pointed out, anytime you have that much money being talked about, this is Upton owed, I believe, $22 million through next year.
Yeah, well, you're taking on a starting player for next year as well. You're saying we want this guy next year, right?
So you wonder how much of this was, because, and I'm not doubting Scott Miller's reporting, but, he might have, he's a West Coast guy, I'm guessing might have been more of a San Diego-based source, and I'm speculating on this. I have no idea. Was this a case where Dan Duquette jumped the gun, or was this a case where Peter Angelos initially approved it and then changed his mind? Who knows?
It's the Orioles. Who knows?
Sure, but I'll say this much, and we talked about this the other day. I was really not all that hot and bothered about getting Melvin Upton. I was afraid that because of the money he was making, that this was going to put Hyun-Soo Kim on the bench more. I want Kim's .410 on-base percentage in the number 2 spot in the order. I'm sorry. I want him on base for Manny Machado and for Mark Trumbo and Chris Davis when he snaps an 0 for 24 skid, and hopefully sooner rather than later. Upton, I get it. Good defensive player, has speed, hits some home runs. But he's got a .310 on-base percentage. I mean, the Orioles don't need more guys like that. They need more guys like Hyun-Soo Kim, who had, their most lucrative month offensively was June, when Hyun-Soo Kim became a regular at the top of the order behind Adam Jones. So
it's crazy we're sitting here at the trading deadline talking about him, right? Like in March, that would have been we would have laughed at that, right?
Well, but it also proves why we don't get fooled, good or bad performance in March. Miguel Gonzalez is another example. Look how bad he was. Looked like his career was over. And I'm not saying he's been terrific for the White Sox, but if the Orioles saw that his velocity was back to normal and was pitching the way he did, he'd certainly fit in as their number 3 or number 4 starter right now. That much is sure. But anyway, I just the Upton thing. You're taking on a little bit more money. Fine. They were going to have to give up another prospect or two. And as much as we kind of scoff at some of the low-level prospects, I mean, you think back to the Travis Snyder deal that clearly didn't work out whatsoever. But one of the pitchers the Orioles gave up in that deal for Travis Snyder has made it to the major leagues this year for the Pirates. Was pitching really well at AAA. So you do wonder, you do worry with Dan Duquette. As much as he's made some nice off-season trades, like the Mark Trumbo trade that was just phenomenal, like Brad Brock a couple years ago, getting him for nothing from San Diego, essentially. His in-season deadline trades, for the most part, have left something to be desired. So in the case of Upton, who wasn't going to dramatically improve this team's situation, I was fine with that not happening. Now, the Angelos thing makes you ask questions about it, but at the end of the day, I don't think the Orioles are going to be looking back in late September. If they're not making the playoffs, if they don't win the division, I don't think it's going to be because of their failure to get Melvin Upton.
The pitcher you're talking about is Stephen Brault, right? Brault or Bro?
Brault.
Okay, yeah. I mean, he's in the big leagues.
I don't know if he's in the big leagues right now, but I know he made a start for them, just before the All-Star break, and has pitched well at AAA. I mean, he's someone who, could, if he was following the same career path over the last 18 months, he could have been in Baltimore helping right now. So
maybe a Tyler Wilson or Mike Wright, right?
So
in that class, right?
Right. So as much as we always kind of look at the lower level prospects and say, okay, well, other than first round picks and guys like that, guys that are high profile when they're first selected, we kind of look at those guys and say, oh, no big deal. Well, those are the kind of guys, if you want to rebuild your farm system, you need to start stockpiling guys like that. So as much as I want to see the Orioles try to make a move specifically for a starting pitcher, I've also been realistic enough to know that, one, there isn't a whole lot out there. Two, there are lots of teams with better systems than the Orioles trying to get starting pitching as well. So it's going to be difficult. In a perfect world, you'd like to come away with someone. I think they'll still try to. I'm just not convinced it's going to be anything markedly better than what they already have. And the good news is they have pitched better since the start of the second half. And at the very least, Gallardo's been better, and Dylan Bundy and Vance Worley have at least pitched well enough to say they're maybes, and that's more than they had a month ago when we were talking about the state of this rotation. So, we'll see how these next few days play out. It's going to be very interesting around the league, that's for sure.
Important. Are you properly hydrated at this point, Luke, knowing what you're about to go through here the next couple of weeks?
Oh, no doubt. I mean, the last few nights at the ballpark where it's been 90, 95 plus, being out at training camp, I'll be well prepared, no doubt about it. But I'll definitely be drinking the H2O. That much is certain.
When these long days happen, just remember those days on the beach in New Jersey. That's all I can say.
No doubt about it.
Luke Jones joining us here. He'll be at Oriole Park at Camden Yards. We together will be out with Joe Flacco and John Harbaugh and Terrell Suggs and Steve Smith and all the rest of the gang out in Owings Mills as Ravens training camp kicks off. Full reports at WNST.net. And, of course, our text service will keep you abreast of any breaking news. If you're on it, you know how good it is. All brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. You can reach me anytime, nasty at WNST.net. LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram. Luke is Luke at WNST.net. Also, Baltimore Luke out on Twitter. And, of course, anything you miss here, you can find in the Buy a Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device. Just download the TuneIn Radio app. We're also streaming live on Facebook Live as well as on our WNS TV YouTube channel. And, of course, the morning newspaper wraps it all up nicely at 7 a.m. every morning. It comes to your email inbox. That is brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. So much sports ahead. Orioles headed north of the border this weekend. Ravens trying to get it together. It is a beautiful, beautiful time to be alive here. Excuse me, the first place Baltimore Orioles. I got to continue to say that. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.